I'm dreaming! Come on, wake up!
You know the story of the young girl who's lived a sheltered life but suddenly finds herself trapped in a magical yet dangerous world
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
where her main opponent is a powerful witch she seems hopelessly overmatched against.
I'll get you, my pretty.
But fortunately, she makes some friends who help her out and whom she helps out in turn. She also learns that despite her fear, she's not just a timid little girl. She's a lot braver and stronger and more resilient than she first thought herself capable. And then the whole thing ends with the suggestion that it was all a dream.
There's no place like home.
Of course you do. That's Spirited Away, one of my absolute favorite movies, which I'm somehow only just now realizing sounds a lot like The Wizard of Oz. Huh. Who knew? Then again, those similarities, while noteworthy, only go so far. Dorothy, after all, never has to get a job in the Land of Oz. She doesn't have to put up with cranky coworkers or derisive supervisors. She doesn't have to save her parents from being slaughtered as pigs. She never forgets her own name.
Chihiro, that's my name, isn't it?
She never has to force-feed her friend a ball of spirit ipecac when he's bleeding to death in the form of a dragon, causing him to puke up a golden seal that he stole from the witch's twin sister. And, crucial to this video, Dorothy never encounters a mysterious demon who follows her around and at first seems eager to help, but whose intentions become more sinister as the story progresses, leaving you wondering just how evil is this guy? That guy is No-Face, and he just might be the greatest side character ever. I say side character here because supporting character doesn't quite fit. Going back to The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion are supporting characters. Though they have their own character arcs,
Why, you're nothing but a great big coward.
their main function is to be a part of Dorothy's story, aka the plot. You could say the same about Haku, Lin, and Kamaji. They also have their own arcs, but are mainly there to support Chihiro. They're so much a part of Chihiro's story that it's hard to imagine Spirited Away without them. Lin shows Chihiro around and teaches her the job. Kamaji helps Chihiro in ways she couldn't help herself, and Haku is Haku. You're not telling the story without him.
Don't talk to me and address me as Master Haku.
But No-Face is different. He's largely peripheral to the plot. From a purely narrative standpoint, he's not necessary to any of the film's 5 acts. From Chihiro and her parents getting trapped in the spirit world, to her getting a job at the bathhouse run by Yubaba, to her rescuing Haku, to her journeying to Zeniba's to return what Haku stole, and to her helping Haku remember his name, which sets him free, before he helps Chihiro return home. While this criminally brief synopsis of mine obviously leaves out a ton, Even stripped to the bone, it still works really well. If you came up with this as a writer, you'd be thrilled. It's a once-in-a-lifetime idea that absolutely could have been the basis for an excellent story. And yet, without No-Face, that story wouldn't have worked anywhere near as well. And that's what I find, or one of the things I find, so fascinating about him. Why does this movie depend so heavily on a character who doesn't seem to matter? To answer that, we need to get to the heart of what Spirited Away is really about. You know how when you meet someone for the first time, one question that's inevitably asked is, "What do you do?" I hate being asked that because I don't have a very interesting job, and I don't like the idea of my job somehow defining who I am. Now, we never hear that question asked in this movie, but that's only because for pretty much every character we meet, we already know the answer. They work in the bathhouse. Like most places that employ a lot of people, the bathhouse is a world unto itself, one that's rife with factions, hierarchies, petty squabbles, jerk bosses, and demanding customers.
The radish spirit.
I love this scene where Lin, despite being annoyed at having to show Chihiro around, upon running into a customer, immediately adopts this false enthusiasm that anyone who works in retail or the service industry will instantly recognize.
Sorry, sir, this elevator doesn't go any higher. You'll have to take another one. Thank you.
While the bathhouse is unquestionably magical, it's not exactly wonderful for the people who work there. It's actually a pretty crappy job, which makes the story, despite all its weirdness, surprisingly relatable. Raise your hand if you've never felt stuck at a crappy job you'd love to leave.
Lin and Sen, you get the big tub today.
What? Hey, that's frog work.
For bathhouse employees, it's even worse than that because they never leave at all. They live at the bathhouse. Forget about work-life balance. Work is their life, and it's one many would love to escape. As Lin says to Chihiro one night,
I've got to get out of this place. Someday I'm getting on that train.
while I root for Lin to make good on her vow, if she's anything like Kamaji, I'm not holding out hope. It's Kamaji.
Sega is one of the most fascinating entities in the video game industry. Once a beloved console manufacturer, their continued missteps led them to reluctantly pull out of the market, as the competition had grown far fiercer than when they had initially began. But it wasn't always like this, with the release of the Sega Genesis marking a massive shift in the gaming landscape, creating the first legitimate threat to the absolute monopoly Nintendo had on the market. A name so closely attached to the concept of video games that the term Nintendo itself was often used as a synonym for the medium as a whole, now had to face a challenger in a space where they had gone nearly uncontested, and the Western branch of Sega, known as Sega of America, clearly understood the threat they could pose, pushing an aggressive marketing campaign directly targeted at Nintendo, with Sega's new mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog, at the forefront of it all. But Sega's primary focus for their game development was on a Japanese market. While Sonic had made a huge splash in America, Sega lacked other first-party titles that could appeal to a Western market, and with the rise of Nintendo's next system, the Super Nintendo, Sega would need something to stand against it. And so, Mark Cerny, a young software engineer and one of the only American employees at Sega of Japan, pitched an idea for a Western-based game development branch, leading to the creation of Sega Technical Institute, also known as STI, responsible for producing titles such as Dick Tracy, Kid Chameleon, and Comix Zone. But in truth, they are probably most well known as being the primary developer for Sonic 2, 3, and Knuckles, something that only happened after the Japanese-based Sonic team had grown tired of working under Sega of Japan, leading to the group moving to the United States to work with STI. However, the American-based developers still had far greater ambitions beyond assisting Sonic Team, and so, in November of 1993, a proof of concept for an original Sonic title known simply as Sonic 16 was created by Peter Morawick, the lead designer of Comix Zone. Pitched as a slower-paced action stealth-oriented game based on the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon series colloquially known as Sonic SatAM, 16 was a far cry from any game in the series prior, with new abilities like a ring toss, a buzzsaw used to clear obstacles, and an AoE spin attack, with Morawick planning for the game to have additional sections utilizing Sonic's trademark speed should it turn into a full project. However, upon showing the demo to Yuji Naka, one of the founding members of Sonic Team, he gave the game a simple thumbs down, ending Sonic 16's life. While Peter Morawick's potential Sonic game was canned, another Sonic title helmed by Michael Kosaka, a lead producer at STI, would begin production in 1994 for the 32X, an add-on for the Sega Genesis created for the sole purpose of prolonging the system's life. Christened as Sonic Mars, this title had ambitions that stretched far beyond anything the series had done prior, and in only a few years, it would slowly become one of the most strenuous developments of any title at Sega Technical Institute, in no small part due to the internal struggles at STI itself and the constant demands from higher-ups at Sega, as they were in desperate need of a new title to keep up the momentum they had carried thus far, and their continued bad decision-making would only serve as one of the biggest hurdles to the life of both this game and their brand as a whole. The initial design document for the game would be finished on May 17, 1994, penned by Michael Kosaka. Sonic Mars was pitched as a free-roaming 3D platformer, an extremely ambitious concept for the time. The story involved the Freedom Fighters receiving a distress signal from one of Dr. Robotnik's supercomputers, containing a VR world known as Micro Mobius, home to creatures known as MIPS, with Robotnik seeking to conquer this digital world for himself. When Sonic returns to Knothole from a routine security check, he finds his friends have been captured and brought to the VR world, and so Sonic sets out to rescue them and help liberate Micro Mobius. The game was planned to have 6 playable characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Sally, Bunny, and a new character created by artist Chris Sen known as Tiara Bubowski. Acting as a potential love interest for Sonic, Kosaka wanted her to have a spunky personality to match Sonic's attitude, specifically desiring to create a female lead for the series who wasn't just a damsel in distress. Mars was planned to have 6 main zones with 3 acts apiece, and clearing each one would also unlock new characters. Level 1 was King's Gambit Zone, described as having a chessboard theme and would unlock Tails. Level 2 was Icebreaker Zone, described as a basic ice theme stage that would unlock Knuckles. Level 3 was Fat Tuesday Zone, described as having parade floats and cake tops where you would unlock Bunny. Level 4 was Dreamweave Zone, described as having cloud tops and star fields where you would rescue Sally. Level 5 was Cryptic Grotto Zone, described as having seaweed beds and caverns where you would rescue Tiara, and the final level was Core Memory Zone, described as having electric paths and data buses. At the end of each zone, after rescuing a character, a special animation depicting the two high-fiving each other would play, with the end of Zone 5 having its own unique sequence. After rescuing Tiara, the player would then be given a choice between either her or Sally. The latter would walk off the left side of the screen and Tiara would exit to the right, and whichever one the player chose would be usable in the final level while the other one wouldn't be. Near the tail end of the written portion of the document, Kosaka lists various potential concerns that could be raised about the game, and attempts to quell them here, with the final notion being one of the more notable ones. It reads, quote, "Won't the 32X adapter cut into Saturn sales? Won't the consumer be confused about what to buy? What if the 32X fails? Supporting the 32X with a dedicated quality Sonic title will give the adapter valuable credibility as a must-have peripheral. Should the 32X adapter be sidetracked, the core technology for Sonic Mars will presumably port easily to Saturn." Unquote. The last statement refers to the upcoming release of Sega's newest console, the Sega Saturn, that had already launched in Japan and was set for release later that year in North America. While they had no way of knowing it at the time, the 32X would indeed be a massive commercial failure, only managing to push 665,000 units, and only 40 games would ever be released for the system. A variety of short demos were created by Chris Sen to showcase how Sonic Mars could function as a game, featuring a 3D model of Sonic running around a checkerboard environment. While somewhat primitive, these demos offer the best possible look at what the core gameplay of Sonic Mars may have looked like. However, higher-ups at both Sega of America and Japan were reportedly unimpressed by any of the demos created by STI, with Tom Kalinske, the then president of Sega of America, voicing concern over the game's 3D visuals when compared to the likes of the recently released Donkey Kong Country, and Yuji Naka reacted by simply telling the team, "Good luck." Other demos for different types of gameplay would be created by Sen, such as an isometric viewpoint, but these seemingly never made any true progress beyond these mock-ups. The game was planned to be finished by June of 1995, but the team at STI quickly faced several hurdles during development. A particularly high one to start was the 32X hardware itself. While the infrastructure of the add-on was certainly more powerful than the Genesis, it was far from the ideal piece of hardware to create the advanced 3D platformer they had desired. Don Goddard, a designer on Sonic Mars and the game's lead programmer, attempted to circumvent the system's limitations by imitating some of the techniques seen in titles like Doom, and create a functional prototype for the 32X. However, they struggled to find ways to make this version compatible with the full roaming 3D they had envisioned, and so it was scrapped. Another far more glaring issue that would arise during this time was the departure of Mike Kosaka, who had left Sega Technical Institute due to rising tensions between himself and STI's director, Dean Lester, due to alleged political differences. With no one to helm the project, Chris Sen was placed in the role as the game's temporary producer while they searched for a proper replacement. Ultimately, Sen would remain the game's main figurehead, a position he would hold for the entirety of development. Around this time, Michael's original design document would be scrapped and a new one, penned by Don Goddard, would take its place, with Goddard's new vision for the game removing any ties to the Sonic cartoon series, and the title would be renamed to Sonic 32X. During this new phase, it became clear to Goddard that the game was in desperate need of additional programmers, and while several different potential candidates were offered by various STI staff, Dean Lester chose to hire a programmer from the Middle East known as Offer Allen, who, while incredibly skilled, had a hard time working with others on staff, with Goddard claiming that he would often pretend to listen to a given instruction only to then do something else. Another programmer, Christina Coffin, would also be brought on board around this time, and Goddard had a much higher opinion of her. However, he notes that Christina had grown paranoid of other STI staff members, including Offer Allen, who she grew to dislike immensely. While both of these new hires had their own personal problems, Goddard cites far more issues with Allen, recalling that Offer would often lock himself in his office and ignore anyone he had no desire to speak to. As the team increased, so did the overall scope of the game, with Goddard describing much of what the STI staff members had envisioned for Sonic 32X being unfeasible for the hardware they had, comparing their ideas to what Sonic Adventure would become. Still, the team trudged forward, with Goddard creating a new demo for the game that he had described as Sonic running around an empty black area with thousands of rings appearing all at once, while still maintaining a smooth 60 frames per second. This demo was played by Shinobu Toyoda, the executive vice president of Sega of America, who was allegedly blown away by Don's creation, allowing his daughter to play around with it. While the game had potentially found an engine that worked, this period would be short-lived, as the failure of the 32X would quickly become apparent to Sega, and so they urged that all work on Sonic 32X be transferred over to the Saturn, a decision which Don Goddard found disagreeable, as the Saturn's infrastructure was both highly complex and extremely limited in what it could render for true 3D graphics. While the Saturn was the primary choice to pivot development towards, there was another option available to STI that they would begin exploring, involving a partnership with a company Sega had invested a sizable amount of capital into. Confoundingly codenamed the Saturn V08 while being completely unrelated to the Sega Saturn, this was set to be a 3D cartridge-based game console created by Nvidia, who at the time were a small, relatively unknown tech company that Sega had invested over $5 million into. While the concept of already beginning to prototype a new system less than a year after releasing the Saturn onto the market may sound strange, Sega apparently had a very specific reason for seeking out a new potential console venture, as they had desired to create a console that would be capable of running Virtua Fighter 3, a game which by 1995 had yet to release or even be revealed to the public. Even so, Sega had clearly understood that the poor 3D graphics capabilities of the Saturn wouldn't be up to par with the highly advanced visuals seen in Virtua Fighter 3, and these limitations would lead them to move Sonic 32X onto the Saturn V08 as well, with several prototypes being created by both Offer and Don Goddard. Only a single mock-up screenshot from this era of the game's life exists, showcasing how it may have looked. This period of time was extremely short-lived, however, as the team had run into several new issues with Nvidia's prototypes, leading the team to shift back to the Sega Saturn after only about a month of development. And overall development of the V08 would end after Nvidia had run behind on their initial schedule by 4 months, and upon finally having the chance to show the Sega executives their work, they were met with a build that failed to start up, leaving the higher-ups to stare at a black screen. This embarrassing showcase on Nvidia's end was enough to scrap the project on the spot. With the Saturn V08 ruled out as a potential platform for this new Sonic title, the team at STI were forced by Sega to fully move development of the game onto Saturn, a decision which directly resulted in the departure of Don Goddard, as they had now scrapped the majority of work he had done for the project and would have to start from scratch. The remainder of the team stayed, and work on the new Saturn version would begin in early 1995. The most important change that occurred during this transitional period to the Saturn was the divide into two teams, with each one working on different engines. Offer Allen had created a level editor for the game known as Sonic Boom that was to be used for the stages, while Christina worked on an engine specifically designed for boss fights. The potential of a level editor to streamline stage design had clear value. However, many members of the team found Allen's engine extremely difficult to work with, an issue that was only made worse by the fact that Allen would consistently release new versions of Sonic Boom, meaning anyone who had become familiar with the editor would have to reconcile with new builds that could potentially feature massive changes that would fundamentally alter how the program works. One notable feature of Allen's game engine was the fisheye lens that would distort the player's view, something that was likely only implemented for two reasons. One was to give players enough space to see what was ahead, and the other, as Don Goddard speculates, was to compensate for the game's lack of curved 3D environments. On the other hand, Christina's boss engine functioned remarkably differently to the core game, with small enclosed areas utilizing fully rendered 3D models for the boss fights, which included Metal Sonic, Fang the Sniper, and according to Christina, an evil Sonic clone, although no materials of this character have ever surfaced. Several different names for the project were also suggested around this time, including Sonic Saturn, Sonic Twist, Sonic Ring Worlds, and Sonic Boom, with each title having its own potential storyline that was pitched. First penned on April 28, 1995, Sonic Saturn's storyline had Dr. Robotnik kidnapping both Knuckles and Tails and taking the Master Emerald for himself, only to accidentally break it, awakening what are described as 6 tall shadows known as the Chaos Elementals who attack Robotnik. Seeing a dark cloud bank with lightning and crackling thunder slowly approaching him, Sonic sets out to stop this new threat and rescue his friends, with the first zone for this pitch being Orange Grove. At the end of each zone, Sonic would face off against an elemental keeper described as mechanized robots created for the sole purpose of destroying Sonic, with the final confrontation taking place in an area known as Gordos, described as being a huge robotic city where Knuckles, Tails, and Robotnik are being held. Sonic Twist's storyline, penned 4 months after Saturn, features Sonic racing through the game's various zones to meet Tiara for a date. The longer the player takes to do so, the more annoyed the princess becomes, leading to Sonic collecting the Chaos Emeralds in an attempt to make a necklace for her. Catching wind of this, Robotnik attempts to use his new Super Duper Mega Ray Cannon, which causes the entire planet of Mobius to warp, a concept that may have come about as a way to explain Alan's fisheye lens, which naturally causes a slightly warped view. 7 zones were planned for this iteration, known as Circus Theater, Gadget Mall, Mayan Tombs, Black Jacks, Deep Seas, Mad Traffic, and Inferno. This would be the only time these specific level concepts would ever be mentioned. Penned at an unknown date after Twist, Sonic Boom's story began with Sonic rescuing Tiara, who is directly described as being a damsel in distress, a notable departure from Kosaka's original desire for this not to be the case. Regardless, Tiara is described as being dangled over a bed of spikes, which Sonic quickly rescues her from, only to find out that the chains that bound her were laced with a virus known as the Doom Sickness. Tiara informs him that only one man knows the cure and is located at a castle on top of Misty Peak. Upon heading there, Sonic finds Professor Bubowski, the father of Tiara, who takes Sonic to his lab, telling him that he can make a cure for him once he finds all the necessary ingredients spread across different worlds. One interesting note about this iteration is an area known as the Twist Chamber, which seemingly functioned as a hub that Sonic would use to travel to each level, the name possibly being a direct holdover from the Sonic Twist pitch. And finally, there is Sonic Doom, penned on January 17th, 1996, and features a far more in-depth game scenario compared to the previous iterations. The basic framework of the story is based directly on Sonic Boom, beginning with Sonic rescuing Tiara before becoming infected with a deadly poison, known in Sonic Doom as the Doom Virus. One notable deviation is that of an early tutorial level directly stated to be Emerald Hill Zone from Sonic 2, created for the sole purpose of getting the player acquainted with the new 3D gameplay system. After this stage, Sonic meets up with the Professor, who leads him to the Map Room, serving as a retooled Twist Chamber. From here, Sonic would gain access to the 6 zones planned for the game, with each one containing an ingredient needed to cure Sonic. A core mechanic of this version was a global time limit known as Sick Time, with each act in a zone having a time limit attached to it, and if the player were to expire all of their available time, Sonic would succumb to the virus, resulting in a game over. Like the other versions, the end of each zone contained a boss that are described as being highly mutated in nature, referring to them as metal beings now made organic. There were also 9 bonus rounds the player could complete in order to obtain new abilities for Sonic, although the details of what these are unknown. After collecting all of the cure ingredients, which are said to be light-hearted in nature with items like a gumball or old shoe, Sonic would be met with an imposter, Bubowski, who demands that he gives him the cures. Upon refusing, this faker reveals himself to be Dr. Robotnik. The floor would then open up, allowing access to the final level. If the player had desired to collect some of the power-ups they may have missed, they were free to revisit any level they wanted. However, the longer the player prolonged the final confrontation, the more difficult the battle would become. After defeating Robotnik, the game would split the screen in half, with the left side showing how Robotnik came across the Doom Virus by breaking open the Master Emerald, while the right half would feature the game's credits showcasing characters of the game's staff. The final publicly available portion of the game script is a somewhat tragic setup for a potential sequel, as while Sonic Doom vaguely introduces the concept of the Doom Virus and Doom Chaos, the 6 figures that were released from the Emerald are never battled themselves, with each one of them using a different elemental power of the universe, having taken control of Robotnik's machinery. Their power far exceeds anything from the Doctor. While the pitch for Sonic Doom was easily the most fleshed out of all of the game scripts that had been created so far, this story and overall game concept would never be utilized, and a new title known simply as Sonic Extreme would ultimately be chosen, and it would remain the game's official title for the remainder of its life. The game was initially set to feature Tails, Knuckles, and Tiara as playable characters, each offering their own unique gameplay styles that would differ from Sonic. Tails would have featured a third-person camera directly behind him, Knuckles would have featured a top-down perspective, and Tiara would have had classic 2D side-scroller sections, with some light elements of 3D as the player could travel in between the foreground and background. Christina Coffin had also desired to make Amy Rose playable in some capacity, having worked with Ross Harris, the 3D artist responsible for creating the models and sprites seen in the game, to make a mock-up of what Amy may have looked like. However, all of these ideas would remain on the cutting room floor, leaving Sonic as the game's sole playable character. There were 6 zones planned for this version of the game, with each one containing 3 acts and a boss. known as Jade Gully, Crystal Frost, Red Sands, Galaxy Fortress, also referred to as Death Egg Zone, Blue Ocean, and finally Metal Blade. As development on Extreme progressed, more issues with Alan's game engine became apparent, as while it functioned perfectly fine on PC, it was nearly uncompatible with real Sega Saturn hardware, with Mike Wallace, the lead producer at STI, recalling it ran at a mere 2 FPS at the time. And so, Robert Morgan, the lead tech director at STI, took Alan's level editor to a company known as Point of View, or POV for short, to assist in porting the game to Saturn, a choice which was made without consulting Alan or anyone else working on the project, with the very first time either Chris Sen or Offer Allen were informed of POV's involvement being a meeting where it was announced to them that Morgan would be replacing Alan as Extreme's lead programmer, a choice that Morgan clearly knew would upset him, as they had already prepped for a potential outburst by having a security guard placed outside of the meeting room. However, Alan remained calm throughout the whole ordeal in spite of having his role stripped from him, while Sen, by his own words, was livid by what they had done. Although Offer Allen had issues with several STI staff members and his engine had caused problems in of itself, Chris Sen would fervently defend the man and was often regarded by other staff as one of the only people who actively worked well with him, with Sen's faith in Allen remaining strong throughout all of development. Quote,
Offer chose to work at home for much of the time in order to avoid distractions and allow him to focus on his coding and design work. Unfortunately, the brilliant work he did, and the insane and consistent number of hours he diligently maintained, we're talking 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, was not understood or appreciated by the management. They didn't see the brilliance in his code, what it had to offer the team. They saw that it was not on the Saturn. They likely viewed his absence from the office as him vacationing. In the end, these misconceptions hurt his reputation. There were some, like me, who defended him, his hard work, and his immense value he brought to the project, but it can often be the case that once people make up their minds, no amount of talking will change it.
Unquote. Although the choice to pivot to POV was already set in stone without Chris or Alan's consent, the duo would still continue to work on their version of Sonic Extreme, internally known as Sonic PC, meaning at this stage there were now 3 entirely different gameplay engines all simultaneously being developed for Sonic Extreme. POV's build, designed specifically to work on real Sega Saturn hardware, Sonic PC, a more advanced version of Alan's level editor that, while potentially impressive, failed to run on the Saturn, and Christina Coffin's engine, designed solely for the game's boss battles. And these internal divides within the team would all come to a head when Shoichiro Irimajiri, the then CEO of Sega of America, visited STI in March of 1996 to see how the game was progressing, being shown 2 different incomplete builds of Extreme, one that had been created by POV, and another that was an outdated version of Alan's Sonic Boom engine that POV had unsuccessfully ported to Saturn. Outraged by the state the game was currently in, Irimajiri reportedly stormed out of the meeting room. However, before leaving STI's headquarters, he would be shown the boss engine Christina's team had developed. Clearly far more impressed with her work, Irimajiri demanded that the entire game be made using Christina's boss engine, a decision that would prove to be by far the most damaging in Extreme's history, and POV would be dropped from the project as a result of this event. Chris Sen and Offer Allen had apparently attempted to intervene, as they allegedly had far more complete builds of their Sonic PC engine, but they were unsuccessful in making it to him in time. While the team at STI now had to grapple with the massive change to the entire development pipeline, Sega had no plans to slow down their marketing push for Sonic Extreme, as they had set their sights on releasing the game by the holiday season of 1996. A massive factor in this choice was due to how poorly the Sega Saturn had been performing in the West, with its failure mainly stemming from several odd decisions on Sega of America's end, such as launching the Saturn months early, confusing both retailers and consumers, an announcement which occurred at the very first E3 presentation in 1995, marking one of the most infamous announcements from the event's history, as well as the higher base price when compared to the PlayStation, all resulted in the system vastly underperforming, and so they had their sights set on redeeming themselves at the next year's E3 press conference, with Sonic Extreme playing a key role in this. First opening its doors to the public on May 16, 1996, this event played a key role in Sega of America's strategy to boost sales of the Saturn. Not only did they announce that the price of the Saturn had been slashed in half from $400 down to $200, but they had also come prepped with a robust lineup of new titles to attract potential customers, with Sonic Extreme chiefly among them. However, Sega would be forced to share the stage with 2 of its biggest competitors in the field, with Sony and Naughty Dog showcasing their new 3D platformer Crash Bandicoot Bandicoot for the first time to rave reception, and Nintendo would finally unveil the long-awaited English release date of the Nintendo 64 along with a playable demo of Super Mario 64. To say that Sega was fighting an uphill battle would be a vast understatement, and one made even more challenging with what they had to show for Extreme itself. While Crash Bandicoot and Super Mario 64 were in near-complete states with playable demos for attendees to try, the issues with the game's production throughout late 1995 to early 1996 meant the team had to create the illusion of a realized video game, starting with a bizarre trailer featuring an actor portraying a mob boss-style version of Mario worried about the impending release of Sonic Extreme.
What do you mean you couldn't catch him?
Guy's fast as lightning, boss. He just disappeared in a blue streak.
Ending it all off on the statement, Mario who? Seemingly implying that Sonic Extreme would be so revolutionary it would make the entire world forget about Mario. The actual gameplay shown off in this trailer is taken directly from Offer Allen's level editor, an engine which had already been thrown out by the time this trailer was released. The footage itself showcases a highly unfinished version of the game, featuring rings that Sonic cannot collect, infinite jumps used clearly in this shot, and oddly some of the clips seem to be either sped up or slowed down, although it's unclear if this is intentional or an actual issue with the engine itself. The most notable feature of this build is the 360 world rotation, in which Sonic could curl into a ball and ride along the walls and platforms which would rotate the levels themselves. Another idea shown off here was the Spin Slash, seemingly an attack for Sonic, although the exact purpose of the move is unclear as it had yet to be implemented, only appearing as an animated model. Interestingly, it seems like this move had been implemented into Christina Coffin's boss engine. The tail end of this trailer showcases Sonic 3D Blast, an entirely separate pseudo-3D Sonic title developed for the Genesis, explicitly marketed here as a direct Genesis variant of Sonic Extreme, with versions for Game Gear, PC, and Sega Pico all being promised. Also of note is the fact that no version of 3D Blast would ever release onto the Sega Pico. Additional footage of the game shown off at the event makes the game's highly unfinished state quite apparent, although portions of the footage also showcase a remarkably different looking build based off Christina Coffin's boss engine, which was fully playable for all attendees to try. It featured a simple square environment with several rings wrapped around a glowing green crystal. A timer was present, and once it ran out, the demo would immediately reset. Outside of that, there are no objectives or any true form of playable content within the demo beyond this. While the facade presented by her was enough to fool some, many outlets did notice the absence of actual content shown off at E3, with the vast majority of gaming outlets instead placing focus on one of Sega's other major titles shown off here, that being Nights into Dreams, a new Saturn title developed by Sonic Team as one of their first major breakaways from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and would serve as one of the Saturn's premier titles for that year. Another Sega game that often overshadowed Extreme was the long-awaited Virtua Fighter 3, which in 1996 was a nearly unparalleled visual and technical marvel that was initially planned for release on the Saturn, an announcement that came directly from a side event hosted by Sega known as Sega Rocks the House of Sonic Blues. Bizarrely, while Sonic's name and image were used for the event's marketing, including a mascot character and render taken directly from Extreme, the game itself made no appearance, with the event being capped off by Virtua Fighter 3. While a port of the game was initially promised and had made strides in development, it would ultimately never release. The only showcase the game had beyond E3 was a Canadian television program known as the Anti-Gravity Room, which featured an entirely separate build that went untouched by the general public. Unlike the one seen in the show floor, this demo featured a proper boss fight against Metal Sonic. To this day, this one clip remains the only footage of an actual boss fight in action. While E3 1996 presented an opportunity for Sega to rebuild themselves after the disastrous launch of the Saturn, and to showcase Sonic Extreme, a game they had initially hoped would play a key role in driving sales, it was apparent just how far behind the game was, and at a showcase that had Super Mario 64, Crash Bandicoot, Virtua Fighter 3, and Nights into Dreams, it is little mystery as to why Extreme failed to generate the buzz they had desired, likely in no small part due to how little Extreme had to show in spite of the promised holiday 1996 release date, something made even more unrealistic by the fact that, unbeknownst to most, development had been forced to restart from scratch scratch only a few months before this event, meaning they would only have around 9 months to deliver a finished product. Despite Sega's efforts to push the Saturn in America, without a new Sonic game available, the system would continue to struggle, especially near the advent of the N64's English release, placing an even stronger burden on the team at STI who continued their work on Sonic X-treme, all in a desperate race against time to release the game by the holiday season. With time against them, Christina and her team worked feverishly to make the stringent deadline, with Mike Wallace recalling that they began working 15 to 16-hour days in a valiant attempt to get the project ready for the fast-approaching holiday season, in no small part due to the actions of the new Sega of America president, Bernie Stolar, who approached Wallace and asked what he and his team needed to get the game finished on time.
So at that time, Bernie Stolar, he was an SVP at Sony PlayStation. He joined Sega of America as the new president, right? So Tom Kalinski's out, Bernie Stolar's in, and one of Bernie's first the first order of business for him, he came to meet with me, and he's like, "What do I need to do in order to help you get this game out?" And so I told him, right. So I said, "Okay, we need to isolate the team, feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? Get them all the tools and contract help we need." And then so after consulting with the team further, the team said, "We need the Knights engine," because Knights had already launched. It was very successful, and it was Pseudo 3D, and we're like, we need the Knights engine, and we can adapt the existing design to work within the Knights engine.
And so the team was sent the Knights level editor, which they would familiarize themselves with for around 2 weeks, until Yuji Naka, the man who had created the engine, learned of this and allegedly became so furious that he threatened to leave Sega altogether should STI continue to use his work without his consent. While this story has been frequently cited as a major hurdle in the development of Sonic X-treme, for his own part, Yuji Naka claims this was never the case. Quote, "The Knights I programmed was coded in full scratch assembly, so there's no way I could share that engine with people who are making it in C because they don't understand it. All these people who tell these stories are liars. Knights program was so special that it's impossible to use it for anything, and I have never even heard of anyone wanting to use it. Saturn was designed to be the most powerful 2D hardware, so 3D was very difficult. I really have a problem with people telling lies." Unquote. Regardless of which side of the story is true, the Knights engine would never see any direct usage in the development of Sonic X-treme, leaving the team with only Christina's Boss engine, which, while fully functional, it would require a significant amount of retooling to function as the game's main engine. To aid in their efforts, Hirokazu Yasuhara was brought on board, previously being a level designer and game director for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, to help craft a new game design, which featured multiple branching paths within each zone leading to different acts and entirely different levels depending on what route the player took, as well as several in-depth pieces showing how each level would flow. These ambitious concepts, however, didn't entirely mesh with the game itself, and the developers of Project Condor had issues bringing them to life within Sonic X-treme. At the same time, Chris Sen and Offer Allen continued to work on Sonic PC and had made significant progress, creating several demos with nearly fully completed levels that they had planned to showcase to Sega for a potential PC game that would be unrelated to the Saturn's Project Condor. While the game was still far from ready, Christina and her team had begun making massive strides in their efforts, and by August, the game had swapped out the Sonic sprite that had been used for the majority of the Saturn version's life with a fully rendered 3D model. Unfortunately, this era of potential progress would be cut short as the immense work toll of Sonic X-treme had finally caught up to Christina Coffin, with her near non-stop work on the game resulting in her contracting pneumonia, forcing her to leave the project entirely. Chris Sen's health had taken a similar toll, as he recalls. Quote,
"I took on far more than was healthy, and after 2 years I became extremely ill.
breaking the rules, guess I'll switch my pace. Something in life you just can't replace. Oh no, you can't replace. No, you wanna dig my skull under your heel, but in time you'll find there aren't any tricks left to pull on me. Fight to be free. I'm always thinking 2 steps ahead. Don't care who stands in my path. I'll never change who I am and who they all believe in. Push me to carry on, crashing to the break of dawn, fighting with the times that are gone, 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 gone. I don't let uncertainty slow me down or make me second guess. I'll pave my own way forward and clean up this mess. Gotta keep on rolling, gotta keep singing the song. It's true if you think that you're faster. Prove me wrong. Lost it all, still I stand. No circumstance, I'll die by your hands. With the strength burned in my mind, bring your words that won't hold back. You can't twist the way I feel. I keep moving on. There's no more holding back. All the souls you toyed with, started with violence, using this word to hold it from me. There's no mercy left, no more. Nothing can bring them back. Be as fast as you are, you can't outrun me. No, no. Caught all the twisted games, I break free all the chains that held me back from showing you what I'm made of. I live to see the day, escape from this place. That's who I am, the master of defying fate. I've got your limit right here. I live my own way and by my own rules. Copy my face and get my ideals. How can you? No! Don't stand down and go about.
I just watched Porco Rosso for the first time, and my immediate thought at the start of the movie was, man, Porco Rosso might be the coolest character ever. He's suave and charismatic. He does what he wants, when he wants. To kids, he's a celebrity. To women, he's the man of their dreams, envied by other men, feared by pirates. I mean, he's a pig who flies planes. He is hands down one of the coolest Studio Ghibli characters ever created. But he's also one of the saddest, because the longer the movie goes on and the more we learn about Porco, the more we realize although on the outside, it looks like he has everything figured out, on the inside, he's miserable. And when you look at Porco through that lens, the whole movie starts to feel different. Because Porco doesn't just act like someone who enjoys being alone, he acts like someone who has convinced himself he deserves to be. The beach, the flying, the freedom, the attitude, it all starts to feel less like a dream life and more like a way to avoid dealing with his past. And that's when you realize the pig isn't just a fun character design, it's a mask. Early in the movie, Gina tells us that a witch is the one who turned Porco into a pig, and she wonders if there's a way to break the curse. But as the movie goes on, you start to realize maybe this curse wasn't made by a witch. Maybe it was self-imposed. Maybe Porco was the one who put this curse on himself. Porco is a World War I veteran, a pilot who watched allies and enemies alike fall from the sky one by one, while he was the only one who survived. And while most of us would feel like the luckiest person in the world to be alive, Porco doesn't feel lucky at all. He feels guilty. Guilty that he lived. Guilty that they didn't. And over time, that guilt turns into something even heavier. The belief that he doesn't deserve to be here at all. That he doesn't deserve to be human. And you can hear that pain in the way he tells this story later to Fio. He says that after watching all his allies go down, he was sure he was next. But instead, he found himself flying on a cloud. And one by one, the planes that were shot down begin rising up around him. He sees his best friend, who just got married to Gina the day before, and without hesitation, Porco offers to take his place. But his friend, along with all the others, keep rising. And Porco wakes up, floating on the sea, alive and alone. Fio tells him that maybe, hey, this was God's way of saying it wasn't your time. But Porco rejects that completely. He says it was God's way of telling him he has to keep flying alone forever. And then he says the line that shows us exactly how he sees himself. The good ones are all dead. In Porco's mind, the people who deserve to live didn't. The brave ones, the honorable ones, the good ones. And somehow, he's still here, which means to him that he must not be one of them. And once you understand that, Porco's entire lifestyle starts to make a lot more sense. Why he lives alone. Why he keeps everyone at a distance. Porco doesn't live like this because he loves being alone. He lives like this because it's easier than letting anyone get close enough to see how he truly feels. The sarcasm, the charm, the swagger. It's not confidence. It's a wall he puts up to protect himself. Because if nobody gets too close, nobody will see how he truly sees himself. The film gives us visual proof of how Porco sees himself in an old photo that Gina keeps. Porco has crossed his own face out. Nobody else, just himself. And that's when the pig stops feeling like a quirky character design and starts to feel like exactly how Porco sees himself. Not as a hero, not as a man, but as something lesser. Something that survived when it shouldn't have. And this is where Fio becomes so important to the story. Because Fio is the first person Porco lets in. Not because he wants to, but because she refuses to see him the way he sees himself. She doesn't see a pig, she just sees a pilot. And slowly Porco starts opening up to her. He lets her redesign his plane. He listens to her, trusts her. A man who kept everyone at a distance finally lets someone into the one place he's always kept to himself, the sky. And then he does something that's even more telling. He tells her the story he's clearly been carrying by himself for years. Because for the first time, Porco isn't just talking to someone, he's opening up. And the more time he spends around Fio, the more you start to notice something subtle. Porco stops living just for himself. He starts protecting her, looking out for her, putting her first. And without realizing it, he's doing the one thing that begins to break the curse he put on himself. He's caring about someone else more than he cares about his guilt. By the time we get to the final fight with Curtis, something about Porco feels different. This time, he's not fighting for himself. He's fighting for Fio. And after having a stalemate in the sky, they take the fight to the ground. And now it's not just any fight, it's a full-on fist fight. In this moment, Porco isn't a beloved pilot. He isn't a famous bounty hunter. He isn't a pig. He's just a man showing up for someone else. And that's when the curse finally breaks. Not because of magic, but because Porco is no longer living just for himself. At the end of the film, we're told that Porco may have turned back into a human. That Gina may or may not have won her bet to be with Marco. And the movie never shows us this directly, because it doesn't have to. Porco Rosso is so much more than
Sonic the Hedgehog can be a pretty divisive series, to put it lightly.
Stop hating on Sonic!
Some people love it, some crazy people hate it, but if there were a narrative
Recently, I played an early access game called Disillusion ST, a game which features these absolutely beautiful 90s era renders fit with all the dithering and compression I need to nourish my soul. And looking into it, I was shocked to find out that all of these renders are actually created in Blender, although with a little bit of compositing on top. Since then, I've committed myself to learning the old 3ds Max / Bryce 3D style, and what I've achieved is near accurate to what you'd see in the 90s and early 2000s. So let's begin. Game cutscenes, TV shows, and album art all have one thing in common, and that is that they do not need to run in real time. Because we don't have the constraint of having to make our models run particularly well, modeling is actually an incredibly small part of achieving this look. One of Disillusion's most popular characters, Mel, is a fairly standard model you'd see in a program like MMD or VRChat. She's smooth, detailed, has a fairly high poly count, and that is completely okay. Feel free to go crazy modeling from cycles because you're running Blender on older hardware or a laptop. I assure you that once we are done tweaking the settings here, you will be just fine. We are crushing cycles all the way down to the bare minimum we need to make a scene. So I'm doing this on a fresh Blender file just so that things are a little easier because my Angel's Egg file has already been
as the game's main engine. To aid in their efforts,
been tweaked entirely. So in this new fresh file, I'm going to set our render engine to cycles and set my device to GPU. Been tweaked entirely. So in this new fresh file, I'm going to set our render engine to cycles and set my device to GPU. Because my GPU is much faster than my CPU. For these samples, I like to have the samples really low because I think the grainy texture that low samples gives these renders actually stylizes them in a really nice way. So I'm going to turn off both noise thresholds and turn off denoising and set the samples somewhere from 10 to 100. In my case, I'm going to do 10. We can close our sampling tab, come into light paths. We can close our I'm going to do 10. We can close our sampling tab, the samples somewhere from 10 to 100. In my case, I'm
Goo goo gaga. I'm a baby. Hey, mommy. I'm a baby wavy. I want mommy. Gonna be bullshitting, okay. Yeah, it looks like some of the textures are gonna bullshit for a second.
Yeah, I'm with Jones, bro. My fault. I'm with Jones. And then we got a fat ass nigga that sound like Fat Albert in the back.
Nigga, I know you're not talking to me, because I would slap the dog piss out you. I would slap you, nigga. You're a little bitch to me. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I would put you in my trunk, nigga. You'd be Celeste, nigga. Stop playing.
Gang, I'm not good. I am not good.
You look good, though. I love me some fruit, though.
Shut your whole ass up. Short booty ass nigga.
Oh, he ain't talking to me. Oh, you're talking to him. That's what it is.